For over a decade, in the bustling financial heart of Munich, Germany, an icon named Wirecard rose with astonishing momentum. It was not merely a payment technology company. Wirecard was hailed by the European financial world as a miracle of the digital era, a beacon of hope for technological innovation in a continent struggling to keep pace. Imagine an empire standing at the center of the flow of billions of online transactions daily, holding the keys to processing payments from every corner of the globe. At its zenith, Wirecard's market capitalization exceeded 24 billion euros, surpassing century-old traditional banking giants like Commerzbank. People did not just see a business, they saw the future, where cash was obsolete, and Wirecard's processing algorithms were the lifeblood of the modern economy. Everything appeared perfect, stable, and utterly convincing under the dazzling spotlight of the DAX stock exchange. But in the world of global finance, perfection is often the most sophisticated shroud for irreparable cracks. Wirecard built its image on a complex operational structure where AI and cross-border payment solutions were celebrated as engineering masterpieces. Yet behind the velvet curtain of meteoric growth lay an ambitious expansion strategy. Focused on emerging markets in Asia, where financial regulations were often opaque and cash flow oversight was a systemic challenge. Wirecard's leaders, with sharp vision and extremist confidence, created a closed ecosystem where transactions were funneled through a network of third-party acquirers. These were mysterious intermediary entities acting on behalf of the company to process payments in remote regions, places where transparency was a luxury unreachable even to the most seasoned auditors. Trust is not born. It is cultivated by the silence of overseers and the greed of investors starving for a new success story. For over 10 years, Wirecard was more than a company. It became a financial religion in Germany. The Federal Financial Supervisory Authority, BaFin, the very entity meant to be the steel shield protecting the market, fell into an inexplicably paralyzed state. Instead of questioning the skyrocketing growth, they chose to protect this titan against attacks from short sellers and brave investigative journalists. It was a collective hypnosis where national prestige was staked on a single name. Every balance sheet, every quarterly earnings report was painted with flashy figures, creating a financial matrix where the line between actual revenue and virtual numbers was blurred to the point of being indistinguishable to the naked eye. We are facing a premise where the operation of the financial system seemed to have slipped beyond the control of traditional governance. Wirecard was not merely a fraud, it was a stress test for the entire international audit system, including the Big Four giants. The fact that the world's leading auditors continued to sign off on Wirecard's financial reports for so many years is proof that the sophistication of this scheme transcended the scope of professional negligence. It was a labyrinth designed to cause interference, a loop where every stop led to a false assumption, fostering the belief that the sheer complexity of payment technology was the reason financial data could never be fully transparent. Every detail was staged, every link was locked, creating a pre-crisis landscape where the collapse was not a possibility, but an inevitability waiting to mature. When the glittering facade began to show cracks, it did not happen with a thunderous bang, but with the faint splintering from deep within the foundation. The first red flags did not emerge from reputable audit firms, but from the dark corners of the financial market, where short sellers began to sniff out the scent of decay. Imagine secret investigative reports, thin documents containing the weight of truth, beginning to leak. Independent analysts, outcasts in Wirecard's eyes, began to question the baffling discrepancy between actual cash flow and reported revenue. Why would a cutting-edge European payment company rely on anonymous third-party partners in remote regions of Southeast Asia? These fundamental questions were dismissed by management with arrogance, framed as ignorance of technology or conspiracies by dark financial forces. The strangeness began to surface through these mysterious payment partners. In the world of online payments, these partners are vital links for processing flows in markets where the parent company lacks licenses. Yet at Wirecard, these partners became black boxes containing the empire's entire mystery. Records show that a massive portion of Wirecard's revenue did not flow through traditional banking systems, but through these third-party units. It is worth noting that no one in the international financial community could verify the actual existence of these transactions. When investigative journalists from the Financial Times began digging, they encountered a paradox. These entities were often registered at addresses with no business activity or controlled by individuals with no background in electronic payments. These signs were no longer mere technical errors. They were evidence of a structure built to generate phantom revenue from thin air. The skepticism peaked when the interaction between Wirecard and audit agencies reached a dramatic stalemate. Auditors from prestigious firms, instead of acting as watchdogs to protect shareholders, were drawn into an endless game of cat and mouse with falsified data. Whenever requested to verify cash balances at Asian banks, Wirecard always provided sophisticated excuses. From blaming local bank systems for being hacked to claiming these balances were in confidential escrow accounts inaccessible to outsiders. They even used bank confirmations that looked authentic, complete with stamps and signatures, but were actually products of graphic design and ingenious staging. The red flags were no longer minor cracks, they had become chasms between belief and truth, leading even the most experienced auditors to begin questioning the very figures they were validating. We must view this as a contagion within the governance system. Wirecard's leaders were not mere fraudsters. They were masters of psychology, knowing how to exploit the complacency of overseers. They used the complexity of payment technology as a shield to hide their lack of transparency. Whenever a warning sign emerged, they launched a media campaign or a headline-grabbing acquisition to divert public attention, causing voices of doubt to be drowned out by the market's wave of excitement. This was a carefully staged financial play involving, whether wittingly or unwittingly, the entire intermediary financial system responsible for preventing such incidents. The warning signals were clear, yet it seems Germany chose to turn a blind eye to what was truly unfolding beneath its feet. When doubts were no longer mere rumors, the moment truth could no longer be hidden arrived. The smoking gun did not appear as a sudden lightning bolt, but as the result of persistent search for truth through a fog of lies. Everything shifted dramatically when investigative reports from the Financial Times, especially those by journalist Dan McCrum, exposed the internal rot through irrefutable documents. Internal emails, spreadsheets, and accounts from anonymous whistleblowers painted a horrifying picture. A significant portion of Wirecard's revenue in Asia was entirely non-existent. The cash flows recorded as pending or held by third parties were merely virtual figures cooked by Wirecard's financial engineers in dark rooms to polish balance sheets with the sole purpose of maintaining market confidence. At that moment, the hunt for cash balances in Singapore and the Philippines became a performance of supreme deception when auditors from Ernst & Young were forced to face reality and demanded direct verification of the 1.9 billion euros in Asian bank escrow accounts. Wirecard had nowhere left to run. They concocted absurd scenarios, from blaming local banks for being hacked to asserting these balances were in secure escrow accounts untouched by outsiders. However, the truth emerged through confirmations from partner banks. Those accounts either never existed, or the figures had been crudely falsified using simple image editing software. That was the moment the technology giant's mask was ripped off, revealing a massive, unfillable financial void. These proofs were not just skewed figures, they were evidence of an industrial-scale fraud system. The third-party acquirers that Wirecard once hailed as its technological secret were, in reality, a network of shell companies created to circulate fake cash. Every transaction passing through these units was inflated, turning meager payments into massive profit streams, creating growth so sustainable it was unrealistic. When investigators traced these entities, they discovered an ironic truth. The head of one of Wirecard's largest strategic partners in Asia shared blood ties with a senior member of the company's management. This overlapping of interests and the absence of independent control mechanisms turned Wirecard into a sandcastle built on the foundation of calculated fraud. The collapse of trust spread like oil on water in the global financial world. When a special audit report from KPMG, hired to verify fraud allegations, concluded they could not verify Wirecard's revenue, the final veil was lifted. There were no more excuses, no more diversionary media campaigns. The cold truth appeared before the world. 1.9 billion euros, the cushion for the company's development, never existed. This was a scandal that left the most seasoned financial experts stunned. It not only destroyed a company's value but also marked the end of Germany's financial pride, leaving a gaping hole in a market trying to find a model of transparency and sustainability in the digital era. When the needle burst the bubble, Wirecard's collapse unfolded with terrifying speed, like a chain reaction. June 18, 2020, will forever be remembered in modern financial history as the day deception reached its physical limit. After he declared they could find no evidence of the 1.9 billion euros in Philippine escrow accounts, Wirecard's management fell into a state of extreme panic. CEO Markus Braun, who just weeks earlier had confidently told investors the company was the victim of a sophisticated fraud, now faced the naked reality. The company had no cash, no credibility, and most importantly, no time. Within 24 hours of EY's statement, Wirecard's share price evaporated by over 90%, wiping out billions of euros in market cap and leaving countless retail investors destitute. This was not a typical stock decline. It was a panic flight, where trust was completely replaced by sheer fear. Creditors, who had pumped billions into Wirecard's system based on dreamlike financial reports, began demanding their capital back en masse. In that context, management was forced to admit that the 1.9 billion euros likely did not exist. This statement was not just an admission of failure. It was the end of the road for the giant once dubbed the Apple of the payment industry. Contrasting with its previous glamour, Wirecard's headquarters in Asheim suddenly became the epicenter of a massive judicial raid. Prosecutors and police began searching, seizing documents, computers, and internal records. Amid the chaos, Jan Marsalek, the powerful number 2 and alleged brain behind the Asian operations, unexpectedly vanished without a trace. Marsalek's escape was the final, dramatic piece of the financial crime puzzle, turning the case from a corporate failure into a suspected international espionage and crime mystery. Speculation about his whereabouts, from Belarus to Russia, only added a darker, more mysterious hue to the end of the Wirecard empire. This collapse left profound scars on Germany's governance structure. The financial regulator, BaFin, criticized heavily for its lax oversight, now faces scathing questions about its very existence. The German government, having had high hopes for building Wirecard into a national tech champion, was shocked to realize they had allowed a fraudster to dwell within their ranks for over a decade. EY's auditors, responsible for confirming the report's veracity, also became the target of public and shareholder outrage. The entire control system, from state agencies to private audit firms, exposed deep fractures, proving that in a financial system too complex and opaque, the truth can be hidden behind numbers with astonishing ease. As the dust settled in Asheim and courts began receiving thick files, the aftershocks left by Wirecard did not stop at lost financial figures. It created a seismic shift rocking the foundation of global auditing, exposing the obsolescence of control processes that had existed for half a century. People began to wonder, in a world where algorithms and AI can generate virtual transactions faster than the blink of an eye, do paper certificates still hold any value? Wirecard's collapse was not just the death of a company. It was the end of blind faith in entities labeled too big to fail. Investors did not just lose money, they lost faith in the system. Employees did not just lose jobs. They lost honor as they watched the company name they were once proud to work for associated with terms like large-scale fraud and financial crime. The echoes of the scandal still resonate in the hallways of the legislature in Berlin, where politicians were forced to look squarely at the reality of BaFin's weakness. A comprehensive overhaul was launched, transforming the agency from a lazy supervisor into a more powerful and stringent entity. Yet, the scars remain indelible. It demonstrates that in the digital age, the distance between an innovative business and a sophisticated criminal organization is sometimes as thin as a line of code. The Wirecard event has unwittingly become a costly lesson, a dark mirror for any fintech company craving growth at all costs. Terms like third-party transparency or payment partner system have now become sensitive keywords, enough to make any auditor sweat when seeing them in a financial report. In terms of humanity, this case is a sequence of personal tragedies. Marcus Brown, from the status of an admired billionaire businessman, now faces long, grueling trials where he must answer for the crimes committed. Tens of thousands of shareholders, who poured their savings into Wirecard, believing in a German tech miracle, are left with worthless shares. Lives ruined, retirement plans shattered, all are direct consequences of a fraud script written by intelligent but unethical minds. The silence that now blankets offices, once filled with laughter and bustle, leaves a legacy of suspicion and hard-learned lessons for the next generation of finance professionals. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the entire Wirecard story is not that 1.9 billion euros vanished, but the ability of a system to be deceived for so long. It shows that when greed combines with technological complexity, humans easily abandon critical thinking to dive into the vortex of glamour. Wirecard entered history not as a symbol of innovation, but as a resounding warning about the necessity of returning to core values of transparency and accountability. When the stage lights go out, what remains of Wirecard is not the future of finance, but a quagmire of lies that the world will take decades to fully cleanse. Looking back at the journey from the height of glory to the abyss of the Wirecard collapse, we see not just a financial fraud, we see a mirror reflecting the inherent weaknesses of the global system. The biggest lesson is not the sophistication of accounting tricks, but the immense danger when blind faith takes the throne. Wirecard succeeded not because its technology was perfect, but because the world was so hungry for a star that they voluntarily overlooked obvious warning signs. Deception can only exist when oversight systems, the eyes meant to see through the night, choose to turn a blind eye due to convenience or the pressure of glamour. In the fintech era, where the line between a utility payment software and an illegal money laundering network becomes fragile, the Wirecard story serves as a cold reminder of the value of critical thinking. Complexity is never an excuse for a lack of transparency. Whenever an organization attempts to hide its nature behind confusing technical jargon or layered corporate structures, that is when we must ask the biggest question. Transparency is not a burden of development. It is the only filter that distinguishes a substantial business from a sandcastle waiting to crumble in the storm of reality. Finally, the story of the 1.9 billion euros that vanished at Wirecard leaves us with a dark but awakening philosophy. Money, if decoupled from actual value and ethical standards, will quickly become a tool for illusions. The collapse of a tech pride is not just a loss of assets, but a costly lesson in professional ethics. The protagonists in this play, the powerful fraudsters, have soon been forgotten by history in contempt, but the ghosts of what they caused will live on in finance textbooks as a warning that in any system, when greed exceeds the control of integrity, the price to pay will always be total disintegration. Always remember that in the world of numbers, the truth often lies in the silence between the lines of a report. Never let the polish of figures dim the necessary skepticism, because behind the brightest financial myths sometimes lies the darkest abyss. That is the final, cold yet practical legacy that Wirecard leaves for us, those observing the game of power and money in the 21st century.